Hi there, I'm Jody from Satsuma Street. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make a funky chicken. These funny little chickens are so cute and so easy to make, and I think once you make one, you aren't going to want to stop. You're going to make them for everybody you know. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how to go from this to this. So the first thing you should know is that the pattern, whether you buy the PDF or the print, comes with very extensive finishing directions and materials list, all the information you need to make these, including the templates for the little felt pieces. These felt accents are what really makes this look like a chicken. Otherwise, it just looks like a triangle. So we got to get those in there. So I'm not going to go over everything that's in these directions. It's in the pattern if you need to know all the details about the materials and what to use. So we're going to start with our stitched chart. I've stitched this on Aida. You could do it on linen or Aida, either one. And I have pressed it so that the grain of the fabric is really straight. If it got distorted at all while you were stitching, you want to make sure, if you can, to straighten it up in the pressing phase. And then I have trimmed it to 1/4 inch outside of the design area all the way around, and that's going to be our seam allowance for stitching it up. So now I am going to put the marks on my fabric of where I'm going to place all of the little felt parts. So let's do that now. So here I have my chart, and you can see that around the edge of the chart are these little dots, and the dots are indicators of where you're going to put your felt pieces. So I need to locate where those spots are on my finished piece and put a little mark there. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm just using a small fine-tipped felt pen so you can really see it on the video here, but you don't need to use something this dark as long as you can see it. And then I'm going to put another one here, which is for the tail. Okay, so now I'm going to set this aside and we're going to work on the felt pieces for a second. So to do that, I'm going to show you the freezer paper method for cutting out felt. And what is freezer paper, you ask? Well, it's made to wrap up food in your freezer. It comes in a big giant box. It's also sold in quilt stores. Do not confuse it with wax paper. It's not the same thing. It is similar, but this is papery on one side and sort of plasticky on the other side. And you can see through it. As you can see here, it is pretty easy to trace these templates through the freezer paper. If you can't see through it that well, use a window. It's a cheap light box. So let's trace a piece now. Okay, so I have a small piece of freezer paper here, and I've laid it over the template for one of the hen tail pieces, and I'm going to use my felt pen to just draw over that shape. And I'm doing this on the papery side, not the shiny side of this freezer paper. And you do want to also trace that dot because you're going to use that. So you're going to need some felt in a few different shades. This is a wool rayon blend, and the colors and source are listed in the pattern. I do recommend that you use a wool or a wool blend felt instead of the cheap polyester felt that you find in big craft stores in the kids section. That has its place, but it doesn't cut out with a nice clean line the way we want for these little pieces. So treat yourself, get some beautiful wool blend felt. It comes in a million different colors, so you're going to love working with it. So we've got our little template, and we've got a piece of felt, and it's really hard to show you ironing on camera, so I'm just going to tell you that you're going to take your piece of freezer paper with the plasticky side down and your traced side up on top of your felt, and with a medium hot iron you're going to just press it and hold for 15 to 20 seconds. You don't need to rub it, just hold it, lift it up, and your freezer paper will be adhered to your felt like magic. So now you can cut it out. Now with a pair of really sharp fine point scissors, these are Fisker's micro tips, I am going to cut out both layers, the paper and the felt, at the same time. And I'm going to cut that out right on the line that I traced. You can also use embroidery scissors if you prefer to get into these little tight corners. Then I'm going to make a little hole with my scissors through that paper, just the paper layer. Don't poke through your felt. And then use my felt tip pen to get in there and mark that dot. And now I can peel the freezer paper off of the felt, comes right off, does not leave a residue, and you have a perfect little piece. And now you just have to do that for all the rest of the pieces of your chicken. So once all of your little pieces have been cut out, we're going to baste them to the cross-stitched material. So you're going to match up each little piece with the dot that corresponds to that piece. And you're going to you're going to line up the flat edge of these pieces with the raw edge of your fabric. And then we're going to baste these in place. Basting is just the simplest stitch you can do, and it's just to hold these pieces in place while we construct the chicken. This will not be seen because you're going to do it just beyond your cross-stitched edge. And you just want to do this so that these guys don't move around while we are putting the chicken together. I'm using a dark color here, but just so you can see it, but I would recommend using sewing thread that matches the color of your fabric. And I'm just gonna make a quick little knot on the other side to secure it. And now that piece is in place, and I'm going to do that for all the rest of my felt pieces. So you can see all of my pieces have been basted in their places, including these two tail pieces. That's the one we cut out a few minutes ago. And now I need to turn this edge with the tail pieces 1/4 inch to the wrong side of the fabric, and with my iron I'm going to press that seam allowance to the wrong side. So here's our edge that we've just pressed to the wrong side, and now we're going to turn this right side up and we're going to fold it in half, matching up these short edges. Now, at this point, you could machine sew this if you're a confident machine stitcher and you are really, really accurate. Maybe you're a quilter, but if you're not, or even if you are, I recommend doing it by hand. That's the best way to make sure that you can match up these little design elements, which once it's finished, you want to see those matched up and not see a gap in between those rows of stitching. And that's just much easier to do and more accurate to do by hand. So now I'm going to backstitch a seam from the fold in this side up to this point. If you're a cross stitcher, you probably already know how to backstitch, but you maybe have never done it before as a seam. So that's what we're going to do. Makes a nice strong seam. So I came up just a little bit above my fold, and then I'm going to bring my needle back down right above the folded edge. And then I'm going to come up again above where I started, and I'm going to go back in where I first came out, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And I'm doing this right in those holes that I used for my cross stitching. And as I said earlier, I'm using a dark thread here to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. But I'm doing that. Just double check as you go that you're not getting off on the other side. You want to make sure, see there, I was about to go a little too far in. Got to wiggle my seam a little bit there and come in just in those same holes that my cross stitching is in. And that is your back stitching. You're going to do this all the way up to this point here. And as you go, you're going to just keep an eye on making sure that these little parts are staying matched up. And if they aren't, you can kind of wiggle them back into place. That's the nice thing about doing this by hand, is you have a lot more control over your seam because you can look at it. So once you've finished your backstitch up to that point, just open this up a little, take a peek, and make sure that none of these little felt pieces have gotten caught in the seam. This little comb piece is very close to that edge, so you want to make sure that's not caught, that the beak didn't get folded over. Just make sure those are looking right and that all your little design elements are kind of lined up the way you like. Now's a good time to check that before you move on. But now you're going to turn the corner and you're just going to continue backstitching all the way down this edge and over this folded edge. You're going to stitch that fold into place. I've done my backstitched seam down this side. You can see I've stitched over that fold. And now I'm just going to take a couple more stitches here to secure it that go over that fold. This is essentially just gonna sort of lock this seam because it's gonna be under a little bit of stress in a second when we turn it right side out. If you didn't see what I just did, I made a little knot without telling you. So I took a stitch, and then before I finish pulling that loop through, pass my needle through the loop and pull it tight, and that'll make a knot. and you're ready to cut your thread, and your backstitched seam is done. Okay, we're in the home stretch. So my seam is done. Before I turn it right side out, I need to trim this corner point. I'm going to trim off the seam allowance at that place where we turned the corner, so that when you turn it right side out, there isn't bulky seam allowance in there, keeping it from having a nice corner. So I just trim that off, and that's all you need to do. Okay, so now it's time to turn it right side out. This is the moment of truth. You want to do this really gently and slowly so as not to snag your cross stitching, your beautiful cross stitching, or mess up your little felt parts. They probably wouldn't tear, but you don't want to risk it. So just do this real slow. It's very exciting to see it get revealed as it all gets turned out. Okay, we're almost there. So now I would say take a little sharp pointed tool, not sharp, but a pointed tool. This is just a broken paintbrush, and you're just gonna use that to kind of pop out those corner points at the bottom edge and the top edge. This isn't quite sharp enough, but you get the idea. And so there we go. And you can see, I don't love that you can see my black thread, but you can see that these little design parts have all matched up, which is just what we want. And then the magic is you go like, you've got this, and then you go like this, and it's a chicken. So now we get to fill it. To fill the chicken, you can use a lot of different materials. I have a list in the pattern of different suggestions. I use a combination of polyester fiber fill, just, quilt batting, whatever polyester fill, and these poly pellets, which are little plastic beads that are made for filling bean bags and toys and things. And that just gives them a little bit more heft. If you just used fiber fill, they would be very light and bouncy, and they might not stay where you want them to be. So putting a little bit of weighted material in the bottom part of the chicken will help it sit nicely on a shelf or your sewing table or wherever you're gonna have them roost. So I'm gonna start filling this, and we're almost done. Once your chicken is almost filled, as much as you'd like, and however much filling you think you're going to need, you probably want to like double it or triple it because it's more than you think. And I like a nice plump, chunky chicken. So you're going to stitch this opening closed, and you want to make sure that this dot on the tail and the seam here at the back are going to match up. That's how your opening works. And I have switched to a beige thread here because I don't want to see those black stitches, and I would see them for sure. So you're just gonna take little angled stitches, very, very tiny, from one side to the other. And I find that if you get those stitches in between a cross stitch, or in between two cross stitches, they're almost invisible from the top side. So then once you get in here where the tail is in the way, I do it from this side. Do one more stitch here. You kind of have to go back and forth. Flip your tail over, come up, put your needle back in on this side, come out over here, go in from that side, flip over, and so on. This part is definitely the most kind of fiddly, so take your time. I'm going a little too fast to make it neat. But hopefully you get the idea. And then as you do this, you might want to stop occasionally and stuff a little more filling in there to fill in these back corners that are going to be kind of flat if you don't shove a little more filling in as you go. So once we are done, oh, and you want to make sure that this folded edge covers up that basting stitching on your tail, which it should. It'll fit just perfectly over that. Once your opening's all closed and you're ready to knot your stitching, here's a little trick to hide your tail. So I'm going to do that trick again that I did earlier. I'm going to just take a little stitch, and then before I pull that through, I pass my needle through it and pull tight. I'm going to do that twice in the same spot just to make it good and secure. And then I'm going to put my needle into my seam and just bring it up anywhere, about a ½ inch away. On the bottom side is fine. Pull that through, and then you can trim your thread. If you trim it while you're pulling it nice and taut, the end is now gone inside of the chicken, and you don't have a little thread hanging at the end corner there. Oh, for cluck's sake, we made a funky chicken. That's how you do it, folks. It's not that hard. And once you make one, I promise you're going to want to make a dozen for all of your friends. So go out there, make chickens, send them to me, share pictures, tell all your friends, and have a great time.